Next session, I'm Jim Youngquist, work with the Institute for Economic Advancement, and I'm pleased and honored to be the moderator for this session and thank Chris Massengill and all the people at DRA for all the great things they do, and we really enjoy our work with them. We're going to take a look at educational and career training this from a stakeholder's perspective. We've got 40 minutes and 5 people who have, I'm sure, plenty of thoughts. We have Bill Walker with Arkansas Career Education. He's director. I'm going to try to go in order here as I'm looking down at you. We have Bill Stovall, the president of the Association of Two-Year Colleges. We have Albert Bennett, vice chancellor for student affairs here at UAPB. Sandra Massey, who's the chancellor of ASU Newport. And last but not least, David Rainey, who's worn multiple hats as we were just visiting with the Arkansas Leadership Academy and education consultant. What we really want to focus on is 3 points, and with the time, just kind of have a conversation, and we'll give you license to pipe in whenever you would like to. But the first point would be, in your positions, what is the role, focus, and responsibility of our state's educational institutions and stakeholders when building a workforce development system? What is the future of their partnerships and trying to address not only current workforce needs, but future workforce needs? And then third, where do the educational activities align, and what are the opportunities for greater collaboration between education, economic development, and business and industry? So I'm going to go back and give you all the first question, which was, what is the role, focus, and responsibility of our state's educational institutions and stakeholders when building that workforce development system? And I would just open it up to any of you to start, and Bill has just volunteered to start it off. So Bill?
Thank you, Jim. One of the things that I'm constantly faced with is challenging elected officials and policymakers to recognize where the problem exists. The biggest part of our problem is that whether we like to admit it or not, or whether we want to talk about it, the folks that we owe the educational opportunity to is everybody in the state of Arkansas and beyond. And unfortunately, we don't all start in the same place. So therefore, any type of universal approach to education, whether it be public education or beyond, is going to give you a broken model. If you don't all start in the same spot, how can you expect to end in the same spot given the same opportunity? Public education has done a good job over the last 10 years of transforming its obligation and presenting new resources here and yonder to assist those individuals that are more resource dependent. But unfortunately, higher education, and I'm sorry I even used that word, post-secondary education, I'm trying to change. Higher education implies there's a lower education. It's just simply not. But with respect to all my academicians in the room, but we haven't addressed that at the post-secondary level. We still have a significant problem funding things in an equitable fashion, and we do a really good job with our NSLA money at the public education level. About $198 million it goes to all schools that have free or reduced lunch students, either in a student population of below 70%, $495 a student, twice that between 70 and 90%, and 3 times that at 90% and above. Well, you don't flip a light switch when that person graduates high school and send them on to their post-secondary environment and not have those extraordinary resources to continue to assist them. But unfortunately, that's the broken system that we have. So I think it's my biggest challenge is to try to impress upon our policymakers that although it's a constitutional obligation in Article 16, Section 5 to deliver the public education model, the workforce model, the associate opportunity at two-year college and beyond to 4 years and beyond just simply needs to be viewed in the same obligation and responsibilities.
Okay. Bill?
Thank you. Once again, thanks to Chris and the team for all of the work and for having this. We're very appreciative. Most importantly, I think we're appreciative to be at the table to have this discussion. And I don't say that lightly. I say that because I think for so long, and I think the Congress and other speakers have referenced the role of career and technical education, adult education. We've heard a lot of discussion about that. That has largely been ignored. I think the biggest obligation we have is the recognition that what we've been doing in Arkansas and in America really is not working for all of our kids. That frankly speaking, one shoe just doesn't fit it all for everybody. And so then what are the options? We've placed so much emphasis on the traditional route. Go to school, get a good education, go to college, go to work, until those kids that didn't fit that mold wind up getting lost in the process. And our emphasis, our focus has always been on the best and the brightest. Be it not for that, we wouldn't be looking at statistics, frankly speaking, where 40% of our kids go on to college and perhaps 20% of those graduate from college. And all the rest are left to kind of fend for themselves. And I think we've got to first recognize that there are other ways of achieving success. And I thought the congressman hit that, quite frankly, right on the head. I mean, it's okay to be a truck driver or a diesel mechanic who goes out and makes $80,000, $90,000 a year. It's okay to be a plumber who happens to make probably $200 an hour fixing a leak that we wouldn't know what to do with if we didn't have a plumber. It's okay to be a welder who can make $70,000 to $80,000 a year. It's okay to do that. It's okay to learn how to do that. It's okay not to go to a 4-year institution and get a college diploma. It's okay to get a certification, stackable credentials, and do what you need to do to make money. And ultimately, it's okay to become an entrepreneur. And I'm pretty convinced that those are the folks that are current and future entrepreneurs, those folks who go out and do what they need to do to get what they need to get because that's what they want to do, and they create jobs for other plumbers and other welders. And I think we got to recognize that. If we truly want to raise the per capita income, if we truly want to create students and kids that are ready for the workplace and also college ready, we got to do that through CTE, in my opinion. I think CTE is nothing more than applied academics. It is applied academics, but we've got we overcoming, frankly speaking, a historical image that vocational education was for the not so bright kids. And all you do, you go there and you learn how to build a little model house, or you put together something that you might not ever use when you go out. And I'm saying that that's wrong. And just like we've got bad schools, we've got some bad CTE programs, and we need to work to improve that. But you start by recognizing that one shoe doesn't fit it all. There are other ways to achieve success and to be productive in the lifestyle, in a life. And we've got to appropriately put our money where our mouth is. I mean, we're looking at CTE, career and technical education, and every state's talking about how important it is. But when it comes down to our funding priorities, we send it the traditional route over and over again. And so those students that don't fall into that traditional pathway don't get the benefit of increased funding. I shouldn't be here talking about that we haven't had an increased funding in career and technical education in 10 to 15 to 20 years. That's insane. It really is. We've got kids that learn how to go to work into the job market today on manufacturing equipment that has been outdated for 10 years, but we don't have the funding to replace the equipment we have. Now, how can business play a role in that? And they are in some places doing that, not only through advisory councils, but in making available that equipment that those kids are learning to do things on, so that when they get into the workplace, they don't have to relearn what they are working on, because now we've got the latest and greatest equipment. But we have got to recognize the value of career and technical education, put our money where our mouth is, and maintain that obligation to all of our students, all of our kids, not just those that happen to be born with a whole lot of smarts. And had it not been for other programs and services that we've been able to come up with, and I can't say enough about the JAG program that Chris Massengill and his team have invested in. We've got a ton of kids. The first real step they've had of trying to turn their lives around was through the JAG program. 90% graduation rates. We've gone into some of the worst schools, in some of the poorest schools, with the least amount of resources, and we've taken some of the hardest to serve kids that were just on the verge of dropping out, and we brought jobs for America graduates, or jobs for Arkansas graduates, to those schools, and not only have we reduced the dropout rate, but we've turned their lives around. They have a national 96% graduation rate when these kids go through a JAG program. That's a career technical education program. We struggle to fund it. We've come out with career coaches now that, because counselors are overworked, that offer another tool in the toolbox to help these kids make career decisions early. And one of the things I figured out about career and technical education is because it's applied academics, you actually get a chance to do some of the stuff that you think you want to do. Well, if you don't like doing it, you can make a decision pretty quickly that I don't want to do that, so you don't waste time. But when you figure out that's what you want to do and you start doing it, now all of a sudden biology makes sense to me. Now all of a sudden math and science makes sense to me because I'm going to use it in the field that I want to be in. And so I know I'm going on and on to get on the soapbox, but I'm glad to be at the table. Thank you, Chris. We've said this a lot, and we will continue to say it a lot, but we've got to recognize what's available for us and for our kids. We've got to put our money where our mouth is, and we've got to make darn sure that we're meeting business and industry needs, and they do that by our advisory councils and many other ways that we can work together collaboratively to make that happen. But we shouldn't be talking about no new funding in career and technical education in at least a minimum of 10 years, but in some cases for our centers, I think it's 19 years is what the senator told me. So I'll stop there and let somebody else squeeze in.
Okay. Albert.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Albert Bennett, Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs at UAPB, and with probably about 20 years of experience in career services as well as corporate relations. And I'm glad that we decided to have this discussion on the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff campus, and I recognize that this is not your first stop. With us being an 1890 institution means that from the beginning, our mission, our goal was to address those issues that confront society. And I would say for more than a decade, UAPB has fulfilled that need. When the need was to train teachers, UAPB trained teachers in every school district in the state, principals, superintendents, and as well as lawyers and doctors. And we recognize that need has changed somewhat, starting in the late 60s, early 70s, and the need is to move more toward the STEM kind of curriculum. And those of you who travel, I believe, north on LA Prexy Drive probably saw evidence of our move toward that STEM curriculum with our new STEM Center, where we'll look at those degrees that are currently in demand. And I'm most appreciative of what the two-year colleges and the technical programs are doing to fulfill that void that our workforce need, and also to partner with four-year institutions as well as UAPB to provide feeder programs. But we're doing some of the things that I've heard today in terms of partnering with corporate America. We feel that four-year institutions as well as all educational institutions have a need to go out and ask corporate America, what is it that you need? And then come back to our campuses and restructure our curricular program and set up internships, cooperative education programs, and prepare students who are ready to go out and work. It's one thing having a degree, but it's another thing being career ready. Someone made that statement. You can have a four-year degree, but you may not be ready to go in the workforce. So as an 1890 institution, still dealing with many first-generation college students or second-generation college students, some don't recognize that you can't be late. You can't take off on on payday. There are some things that you just can't do and expect to have a job tomorrow. And those are some ills that's still facing, our students and our workforce. And so we are addressing those needs.
Thank you. Hi there. I'm with a two-year college at Arkansas State University, Newport, and the main thing I would say is we have a great story to tell, and we don't tell our story well. We need to, first of all, get into the high schools deeper, more often. Students don't understand what we have to offer them, especially when you look at the gender issues. Charlie Appleby just did a camp to try to entice young people into some of the STEM programs, and we get so few females that show up. But when they do, they're just amazed that it's not a dirty job any longer. They can make good money. But we've got to start really young, helping young ladies especially understand that those STEM occupations, they have the skills to do it. They just didn't play with the same toys growing up, so they just have to have a little more skill training to get themselves there. But we've got to get that side of the story told better. And then the other side is we don't tell the story well to business and industry. We have to have these partnerships to get stronger. We are totally dependent anymore on having business and industry partners, but we need them in a greater way than we already have that relationship, and I think they need us as well. And we're starting to talk more to each other to say what we can do for each other. We have some real strong partnerships that have been totally shaped by industry. They've come to us, they had a need. In the better cases, they've helped fund it. Doesn't always happen that way, but that's what we need. We can be flexible, we can be responsive, but we've got to be talking to each other, and we've got to know what those needs are up front.
David?
Thank you very much. Let me just do an assessment rather quickly here. How many of you in the audience believe that education should equal jobs in the global workforce? Wow. Okay. Then what I'll do is rearrange my comments to align with that reality. Now, honestly, I already figured that out, and if I were in the audience, I would have raised my hand, because jobs should equal, education should equal jobs in our global workforce, and I think that's really what this is all about. If it is to equal jobs, here's what has to happen. We've had a lot of conversation about partnerships. But let me talk about it from the macro, and then I'll get to the micro piece in just a minute. From a macro perspective, there has to be, and the key word here is partnerships. There has to be a partnership between the schools, business and industry, and there has to be a partnership between K-12 education and community colleges and four-year institutions. So from a macro perspective, we're talking about getting kids prepared for the workforce, K-16, K-14, K-16, okay. From a micro perspective, when we did an assessment, and I was the superintendent at Dumas for about 3 years, when we did an assessment of the curriculum, we made some determinations about how well we were prepared to deliver college readiness. Our assessment was we were able to do it. When we did an assessment of how well we were able to deliver career and technical education readiness, we had a curriculum that was outdated, irrelevant. We had an instructional strategy that didn't allow our students to have those skills that business and industry were telling us for days on time for years and years that we needed. So we had to do some major restructuring. Some major restructuring in terms of getting our school prepared to deliver students who were career ready. And here's what we found out. We found out that we were really too small to be divided. We had to emphasize those partnerships. We could not get it done alone. So we actually used the Career and Technical Advisory Board to help us determine some of the courses that we were going to offer, some of the new courses that we were going to offer in school. And we listened. And so we added some additional courses. And then we looked at some of the courses that were fairly dead courses and made some determinations about eliminating those courses and adding others. Now, it's no secret. We've had conversations with business and industry over time, and we know business wants folks who can do critical thinking, and we've heard it in all sorts of forms in terms of panels. They've got to have a good work ethic. Effective oral and written communication skills. They've got to be able to access and analyze information. They've got to be able to work collaboratively in groups. And they've got to be technologically literate. So we use those things to identify a sense of direction that we needed to go in terms of our K-12 school. And what we found is, in terms of not being able to do it alone, we had to connect what we were doing with what was available in terms of technical schools, in terms of two-year institutions, and in terms of four-year institutions. And ended up looking at our students and identifying what product we needed to deliver and what resources we needed to access in order to deliver that product. That means, a key word here, expanding partnerships. And ultimately, we moved our school to a new tech environment so that we were focusing on project and problem-based learning, so that kids were learning a good work ethic. And so how do you teach kids a good work ethic if you don't grade that work ethic? And I'm noting here, I've gotten into the macro and the micro, but in terms of how we get our students to that career, college and career readiness, and it simply means that we have to have those strong partnerships, and we can't do it alone.
I guess the question is the question that was written down here is, where do the educational activities align, and what are the opportunities for greater collaboration between education, economic development, and business and industry? My observation is that the two-year colleges get it. The four-year, and I'm employed by one of the 4 years. We are often resistant on the academic side. If an industry comes and says, you know, we need more engineers, and we need the schools in the state to produce more engineers so that we don't have to go all over the country and recruit engineers who may stay in Arkansas for a year or two and then they leave. And when we talk to the academics on, and I'm not picking on the if there's any engineers in here, but just giving an example, well, we've been teaching it this way since 1968. Instead of jumping on the opportunity to work with the biggest industries in the state that need engineers to be able to do engineering work in 2014, not 1968 in 2014. K-12 is resistant sometimes to, we got our thing. So how, with all you being the experts and seeing this so many angles, how do we build that partnership among the education and reach out to the private sector, whether it's, K through 16? How do we do that in our communities?
Well, I think you hit on it right off the bat. We really need to all be in the room together, and it does have to start the K through 16. I've even heard the K through 20 model, but that's the education partners and the business partners. If you take engineering for an example, there is a great high school curriculum, and then that can lead into a 2-year degree. You can have stop-out points at any place along the way where they can actually go and get a job or get a job and continue down that pathway, but then the 4-year partners need to be in the room too, so that can continue through. And it shouldn't be where they take hours at a 2-year college and then they kind of have to retake everything again because they go a different direction. We need to know what they want from us so we can all align that curriculum properly to make that happen. But we can't do it without the business partners in the room either.
It must be an orderly transition from education to work. And in order for that to happen, you must be at the table together, both parties, identifying the needs of each agency. A while back, we had what they call a cluster program, where corporate America would come to campus. Corporate America would visit with the deans, the vice chancellors, and the chancellor, would tell them what their needs are and how they would help them financially to reach those goals. And it was incumbent upon the vice chancellors, the deans, and the chairpersons to tailor-make a curriculum that would fit those needs. And then corporate America would send a team of human resource personnel to campus who would go into the campuses, into the classes, talk with the students, and say, look, if you're going to be successful, if you want a job with this firm, these are the skill sets that you must have. And they would make it very, very plain. So it must be an orderly transition, and that's the only way to work.
Well, I'll take a little different approach, but that's not uncommon for me. In order for folks to communicate, let's just say, for instance, business and industry is one side and 2s and 4s, academicians, are on the other side. There's two parts of communicating, talking and listening. And too often the folks in that room are doing talking and they're not listening. And we're guilty of it from time to time. I think Randy Zook and his business partners are also guilty of it. He shared it with you today that they own part of this problem, and as we do too. Thank you for saying that the 2s get it. We do believe that we recognize a problem, and we believe we're flexible and nimble enough to adjust, but we still have, a particular job ahead of us. We're not doing a nearly good enough job. We've got to address a lot of gaps that are still out there. But we've just, in the communication world, if you and I, there's at least 3 former elected officials up here on this panel. And if they don't do a good job communicating, they don't get to keep their job. And believe me, they have a tough job. They have a tough job making critical thoughts and then putting those votes down for time and forever. And there's only 2 kinds of votes up there in that building. One of them's a bad vote, and the other vote is the one that someone can make look like a bad vote. And so when you talk about partnerships, I'd like to encourage the public to partner with their elected officials. They won't say it, but I can say it for them. It's not an easy job. And they got to make tough decisions. And they're in a world today with more accountability, more transparency. They say 3 words that happen to come out a little bit sideways and someone's tweeting about it. and with no accountability whatsoever. So among your partnerships, let's put public and public officials together in that partnership and support them. And don't be a one-trick pony just because maybe they didn't vote the way you wanted them to one time or second time. Let's support our public officials as a public as a whole.
Okay. Bill?
Well, it sounds like a former speaker would say something like that, but I agree with him as a former elected official. I think you're right, though, Bill, and I would take a slightly different approach because I do think you have to both hear and listen, and I think we've got to not be so afraid to step outside the box, the traditional box that we seem to always fall back into when we ain't quite figured out the direction that we might want to go. We don't have necessarily all the answers. I think we just got to be creative and try some things differently. When I was growing up, it was simple. My dad told me, he said, hey, if you do what you always have done, you get what you always have gotten. So do something different. And he also told me, he said, look, I'd rather have you err on the side of trying to do something different and right than do nothing. And so I think that we owe it to our future leaders, our future students, our future employers, employees, to try different things to go in different directions, because we've spent all of our energies doing the same thing for a long time. And I think we're now getting to the point of recognition that, hey, it's just not going to work for everybody. And so we're leaving most of our folks behind. And I think that, frankly speaking, the future of business and industry in Arkansas, they've registered pretty loud and clear. It's not just about brick and mortar and tax incentives. It's about a qualified workforce. And if you can't provide us that, we have to go somewhere else where we can get that, because it takes that to make the products and to provide the services that we provide. And so if we can't get that, then we can't make a profit. And it is about the bottom line. It is about a quality work employee that comes to work every day on time and that is able to perform when he or she gets there, because they've been trained through a system that we have here. And I think, government has to become more flexible. I mean, we've got to be quick action, not just in the monies and the incentives we give. We've got to be quick actions in the programs and the trainings and the education that we provide. We've got to be able to shape and move around so that we can meet the needs of business and industry. And business and industry has and must continue to be heavily involved in helping to shape the direction and the things we have. It's like I said, the partnership where we have some business industry providing, because they don't have the updated equipment, they provide the new fresh equipment so those kids are trained on what they're going to have to use in that industry. That's important, because a lot of those pieces of equipment cost a pretty good amount of money. And so, I think we're right. I think we got to be different. We got to be quick to respond. We got to have quick action, and we've got to think outside the box and do some different things. And so I think that's what we got to do.
David?
And I think I can be brief, because the panel, they've covered all the big things, so I can just focus on a couple of small things. The partnership that I spoke about in the macro, in terms of micro, the curriculum. Business and industry can help schools construct a relevant curriculum to build the skills they need in their fields. That's the one thing. Now, it's important for a couple of reasons, because schools are struggling with giving students relevance, reasons why you're doing this. So we've got to have business partnering with schools to give students more experience in the workplace. So on the one hand, they can assist with the curriculum piece, and on the second hand, they can assist with the application of those curriculum skills in the workplace.
We have a minute or two. Questions of the panel that you might have? Yes.
I've heard a lot of discussion that has really been focused around more what we might define as the pipeline, whether it be K through 12, those people who are working towards the workplace. We've also got a lot of non-traditional students We've got a lot of people, like in my position, baby boomers, who would like to retire, but perhaps can't retire, and may be looking to upgrade their skills. How do those participants in this equation affect what we might consider doing?
Want to go ahead?
We have a lot of non-traditional students, so one, we reach out to them in a different way. A couple things we've done at ASU Newport. One, we now have a Vice Chancellor for Economic and Workforce Development, Mr. Appleby, whose focus is to be out in business and industry in the 3 areas that we serve. So not only are we advancing skills on the job, but it gives people an opportunity to completely retool if, a business is going out or if they're shifting focus or whatever. We're totally dependent, again, on these relationships with our advisory councils, as you were alluding to. We change our curriculum based on what they're telling us. Most recently, we do have an industrial maintenance. I know several of you do too. That came up earlier this morning. And the reason we have it is because business and industry told us that that's what they needed. We had 3 programs, but they wanted a blend of those 3 programs. So that's exactly what we did. Again, we're doing a lot of things that can reach out to the person. We had an example recently where a gentleman retired from a company. He wanted to do truck driving. He came and did truck driving with us and went back and is making a great salary. I'm not sure I'm addressing exactly what you're saying, but we are reaching out a lot to the non-traditional. And I think the conversations we have on the pipeline for the K through 20 or 16-20, it fits with that non-traditional too, because we've just got to get the curriculum, the relevancy, and all of that right. So when a person comes in, they can quickly get those skills and get back into the workforce or out into the workforce.
I'd also just also say that when we're successful at recruiting industry and training folks, typically we're not talking about training a traditional student. We're talking about someone that's been in the workplace in some way or fashion, 25, 30 years old, that's been able to find ways to get to work when the car doesn't start or when the kid's sick or when I had a boss one time that told me, he said, Stovall, he says, if you get up in the morning, you don't feel good, I expect you to come to work. Now, if you're sick, stay home and get well. But I expect you to come to work if you don't feel good. And so a lot of people, whether that's working at Kroger, whether that's working as a bartender, whatever, making some decent wages, certainly above minimum wage. Well, those are the folks that are going to have a great opportunity in the 21st century workforce to develop further skills that maybe after they've entered the workplace and made some decent wages, that want to find a more suitable employment for their dreams. And then those jobs are going to free up as well. So we all boats rise with a rising tide. So all of us are going to get an opportunity if we focus on this 21st century workforce. Real quick. Got to get this in. If you're under 45 years old, you get to answer this question. If you're over 45, we'll see how many people answer the question, and then we might give you a chance. Who all knows what a cruiser rod is? Anybody? Okay, if you're over 45, I know Representative Bragg does. Okay, does anyone know what a serger is? Okay, a Stilson. That's just 3 questions there. Stilson is what we call a monkey wrench. It's a pipe wrench. The serger is a sewing tool for binding cloth. And a cruising rod is measuring timber after the log's been bucked and ready to go to the sawmill. Now, I bring all that up to share with you that when I was in the legislature, I didn't recognize. Someone would come up to me and say, you mean we have trained someone to work in a factory? Yes, we do. Arkansas is no different from the rest of the country. We're not doing things with our hands when we're growing up unless it's playing a video game now. And we're not sewing. That teaches math and measurement skills and creativity. There's a lot of things. Canning in the home is gone. Measuring. All these things that I grew up with, I'm 55 years old, they're gone. And so what happened? Our kids take a different path than what we did, and therefore they don't know what these things are. And that's why we're having to re-educate and we're having to retool to do that education. So I appreciate you indulging me in my little assessment. You failed like I expected you to. That's all right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if you're walking into something about entrepreneurship,
You said, is there something on the horizon in the schools that began to teach the students entrepreneurship? Is that what? Not that I'm aware of, frankly speaking. I think that, you know, there are all sorts of, you know, business courses, or it depends on what they want to do. If they're interested in becoming, you know, owning a plumbing company, obviously they go through the process of learning to be a plumber, but specifically teaching students how to become entrepreneurs, I think that we have had some, and I'm looking over at Sandra now, because I think we did have some entrepreneurship program that we, in the business marketing classes at CTE. So yes, we do have some of those. Thank you, Sandra.
Anything else?
Yeah, we don't. And I do want to say again, I mean, I think all of the stuff that has come up today, I think it's critical to start with having folks at the table. For so long, thank you, Chris, again, you know, enough of us haven't been at the table. And I think we can come up with a lot of good ideas and a lot of good solutions if we are permitted to talk about them and to approach it perhaps with some new and fresh and different ideas. And I didn't know any of them things that you mentioned, Bill, so I guess. But, you know, again, I do think that there are a lot of opportunities, and I wouldn't be so quick not to include some of those folks that we want to help be our students as a part of this discussion as we go forward as well.
Thank you, panel.
Thank you, Brandon.
Mr. Chairman.